Possesom. Everyone, I'll ask that that folks keep their cameras and mics turned off when they're not speaking. So we're going to get started. Wuli tabau, Ndeliwisi wana hamukwasik the Najio Banawabskewi, and Delabama Kawasus no Banawabskewi, Nagakakagus no Tibaik. Good morning. My name is Sherri Mitchell. I am coming to you from Banawabskewi, from the Penobscot territory in Wabanaki. I am from the Penobscot Nation. My family is Bear Clan from the Penobscot Nation and Crow Clan from the Passamaquoddy tribe of Tibaik. I'm very happy to be here with you this morning. We're going to start off this morning with an opening prayer, and then we're going to go to the first speaker. Kevin, will you open us up with a quick opening prayer this morning, please?
Negadiwai are, Zinizu kan Izwes Omuni Sarade, Agwe with Kunwaradu. Negadiwai Zinidawai Hana, Ganusesta Nagua Honda, Zinyor Tana no Hodum Dari Waktandi, Negadi Uka Knean the Hatko with Dokara and Yuana get Zinigane Ganura Dutsara. Zinigane and Wesu Agwe with Kunwaradu. No, as a waga, I touched the Nogadi, no hold the one I don't call you Tini Star Hudza, say you got Kawahaja, a great goods in Hodi, you got touch at the Winizarage, your tedious the rest that's in a Hoda. Toga you going at that to Swada Ganagi, near the one Nigira. None of you got to Kaige, and that they go say you go in a Kakwasun, or the Natsara, Gert Hagun Guatunu, Sero di Dakenuja, Gregune Gudadovaniu. Qua goods in a Hoda Ganga Gero Zage. Senegane Gajako Grego, Oscadawa, Union, the Guanigora, and the Tenorado, and you take Star Hudza. None of us to go to Anaga and Oda Garunion Yoni, and was a Negane Gaini Gawarage, Tisatoga Radiveras. So Guatia Jacaneka Garakwa, Zenita Deus what and one when is the Sutana, Nona Yoguandas, Senegani, Kisata Satanaka Garakwa. Zeniti de Disto Quadunio, Onanane, Zenihati Yaka, the Unes, Nadawana Dukan, and Kisato Gangoa. Nanioni Zini Hadi Tatiha Snow the Doa, so that Zinigari was to go the way and the Guna resumes odd. So Jeris Nioni, none of you want us to the Tanan Hot, you got it saw. On and on there, Zinuan is not Garuyadi, nor the one I do and saw here I got assistance of war. On a Zinigana, where are Kajoko Grego, Oscar the Wawa, Noon in the one going to the noon that said the Novarado, so where this was so here I got assistance of. Tanane Tiara Genioni, the Hodigu Sadaje, Rodriwa Genioni. One of the Gatka Dokaraniwana Gigo Ganua, Dunsra Kadina, Nayotin and Guna. So just to start out with then by acknowledge each and every one of us that are here on this call this morning. What we do in our longhouses, but before we get in do anything, we do the words that come before us or the affairs or business. Because for us, these words help us to understand who we are, where do we come from, why are we here, and where are we going when we leave this place. We have original instructions that talk about the earth is our mother, and every day we're supposed to have attitude of gratitude. And when certain things come to fruition, we gather and we perform sacred ceremonies, songs, dances, speeches, and rituals for the continuation of all life. So we have water, we have clean water, we have the fish, we have all of the plants. We have our life supporters, the corn, the beans, the squash. We have the animals, the forest, the trees, the birds. And when we look up the things hanging in the sky, we acknowledge the four winds, the big winds, our grandfather, the thunder beings, our elder brother, the sun, our grandmother, the moons, the star knowledge, and the star people. From there, we go to the unseen. We acknowledge all of our ancestors, the messengers of the Great Spirit, the ones that come in our dream. And we go to the other side of the blue or the other side of the sky to where we originated from. And to that source of life for all life, we now acknowledge and we give thanks in our minds, and also we have a responsibility to remember the future generations. So with that, these are things that we do. I was asked to say a few words then, so go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And Marcus is having some trouble getting on this morning. So we're going to start off with Elder Jim Dumont. Jim, are you ready?
Can you hear me?
Yes. We can't see you, but we can hear you. There we go. It's good to see you, Jim.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have had a little time to think about things. I guess I can go on. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can be, you're being heard right now.
So I can start anytime then.
You can start anytime you like. You can take as long as you like to be ready. We're here for you. We're on your time now.
Okay. I'm going to talk about the prophecies, Anishinaabe prophecies. Maybe in a slightly different way than usually it's done, but and I'll try to talk about the prophecies in relation to our present time and what is being said to us as the people of this new generation. There are seven prophecies. And the first three talks about the coming of the Medevan and the growth of the Medevan. That's a spiritual way of life. Medevan, and how it became, how it brought a great time of peace and plenty on the East Coast, where it first was put together from the spirit realm, from the sky realm to the earth realm. So those that we call Wabanaki, the Dawnland people. This is your territory. Is a place that the Creator lowered Medevan to this earth. But the first three prophecies talk about how the Medevan way of life was established and how it became a great and good time on the earth in the eastern lands. But the prophet spoke of the need for the people to leave that place, pick up all the sacred things and move toward the west, following the waterways that flow from the west to find their new home on the earth. And the prophecy describes the migration and how the people lost their way in the process of the migration. So it took a long time. It took generations for them to arrive at the great body of water, the Great Lakes, Lake Superior, the great Ojibwe Lake, it's called. And how Medevan way of life would grow into greatness in that new land. And how the people who remain behind, though it was said by the prophets that they would suffer the most in the coming of this this great occurrence that was going to happen on the earth. But the people who today are the present day people of the East Coast, your ancestors are the ones that who followed the migration, and who are also those that stayed behind to keep the fire burning, they said. So we are connected, Ojibwe and Anishinaabe people and the people of the East Coast. So the first three prophecies talk about that, about the Medevan way of life, and about the migration, and about the arrival in the seventh stopping place, and the new home of Ojibwe and Anishinaabe people, and the Medevan way of life. So the fourth prophet talks about the coming, that one day soon a people would come to this to our part of the world. They would come wearing one of two faces, the face of brotherhood and respect, or the face of death and destruction. And we were told to be careful how we accepted these people, because the two faces could look very much alike. But it was said that it could be, if they came wearing the face of brotherhood, that we could build a great nation of the two nations. We know today that he didn't come wearing the face of brotherhood. The fifth prophet spoke of the great struggle that would occur at the coming of this new people, the light-skinned people, they're called. And we have seen that great struggle in terms of the loss of life, the epidemics and pandemics that swept across the country, beginning in the East Coast, where millions of people lost their lives. Disease coupled with warfare contributed to the great death toll of our people. And with that came theft of land, rather than what we thought, that they came wanting to share in the produce of this land. But he didn't come wearing that face. And so there was the fifth fire is the taking of the land by force, and then by treaty. By any means, the land was taken from us. That was the fifth fire. The sixth fire said that they would come bringing a promise of great salvation to the people of this part of the world. But the prophet said, be careful, because the face because the promise that he brings may be a false promise. And if you accept that promise, you will almost lose everything of your way of life. And he also said that the cup of life will almost become the cup, will almost become spilled. The cup of life will almost become the cup of death. So it said in the sixth fire, the time of the sixth fire, the sixth prophet spoke of, he came bringing that promise. Many people accepted that promise, accepted that way of life that made this promise. And they taught their children this way of life that was brought here. The other thing that happened is that children were taken by force and were taken to residential schools and boarding schools. And in that way, the people, the children of the people were the ones that were taken. And that was the way of taking away from us our future, our hope, and our language and our way of life. So that brings us that at the time of the sixth fire, it was said that if all of these events occurred around the false promise and about the face of destruction and the cup of life becoming the cup of grief, because of all those things, we would lose almost everything, including our way of life. But in the dying moments of the sixth fire, a new fire would be lit. So the seventh prophet spoke of that time, which in the time of the prophets is a long ways into the future. The prophet started talking about the new people that would be born, and they would begin to go looking for the ways that were left behind, say scattered along the trail, the things of our way of life that was left scattered along the trail. And that was our language, our culture, our teachings, our songs, our ceremonies, our way of life. At the end time of the sixth fire, it was said that we would be in such a pitiful state that we would hardly have the means to live in the way that we were given. and in terms of the fate of the animals and, and the medicines during that time. And so it seemed that as the anthropologists began to say, that soon, they said, the people and their culture would be no more, and the Indian way of life would be a thing of the past. And so they used that argument to collect sacred items that they took from us during those years. But the description of our people at that time was we were in a really pitiful state. And it looked like what they were saying was true, that we would die off as a people in another generation or two. Our fathers and mothers and our grandfathers and grandmothers had suffered through the residential schools, and the after effects of that were upon us as a people. We, the ensuing generations. It was at that time, or at such a time, that a new fire would be kindled. Said it would be a small fire at first, but the elders and the teachers who had not lost hope would remember, and they would kindle that fire and make it into a bright flame. So this new time was upon us. That's what the prophet was saying. In the future, that new time will be upon us. And we can recognize it by the way our young people are during that time. They will want to dress as Anishinaabe. They will want to speak as Anishinaabe. They will want to know and to be able to participate in our ceremonies. And so these young people who hardly had anything left of the Anishinaabe way of life would be the ones, as pitiful as they were, or would be the ones who kindle, who ignite that fire, the seventh fire. And they would do that by asking questions. They would begin to talk about why don't I have a name? I heard that in the past That's what they did. They gave us names, give names to their children. How come it is that I do not have a name? And out of the innocence of that question would, would, would cause a stir, a stirring, a stir of hope for the future of the people, because it was in those elders, say, who had not fallen asleep, and many of them would have fallen asleep. And those who passed on before, still waiting for that new generation to begin. And there were those who were afraid. Maybe when we look back at our 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 ancestors who were in residential schools, we can understand a little bit about how they were ashamed of even of the very things that were important to us. They were ashamed of our name and our clan and our culture because of what they had been put through. They said some of them would be afraid because our ways were outlawed. And we were condemned by the authorities, by the government, and by the priests and the ministers that brought the false promise. They would talk to the people, convincing them that their old way was the way of the devil, and it was pagan, and they would believe that because of the decision that they made. So when it comes to that time when the young people start to ask questions, there are those people who would be afraid to say anything. Who were afraid of being caught exercising a little bit of their culture. But there would be those who even though they waited for a long time, they would recognize this day. And they would begin to talk about the things that they knew. There wouldn't be many people who were listening at first. There weren't too many elders who were speaking. But it would increase. It started to be many people who would travel everywhere, as the prophecy song speaks of. They would go without sleep, traveling everywhere around Turtle Island, looking for that which was left behind. They wouldn't be able to sleep knowing what had been done, knowing what had happened. So the time of the seventh fire began almost imperceptibly. Advertising Tim Hortons there. So during that time, it would begin in that way with the young people, those who had lost the most of what was given of our way of life. They would be the ones who would begin to ask questions. And it was the young people asking questions that would, as it said, they will wake up those who remember. As many or as few as that might be, their quest to find our way of life would wake up those who still held on to bits and pieces of it, or a great amount. As I talk about this period of time, I can't help but think that I think about myself, how I was in my youth, which was, I was born in the 40s, grew up in the 60s, in the 50s. And by the time the 70s came along, it was in the late 60s, I started to be one of those people. I never heard the story. And it would be 4 or 5 years before I would come to that Medallion Lodge and find those teachings and prophecies. But in the late 60s, I started to ask questions, those very questions. What is my name? What is my culture? Who am I? And I traveled across the country looking for those things. So I have a very personal attachment to this part of the prophecies, because who they were talking about was me. But as I said, it was a few years yet before I would find that. So it said in the prophecies that the children, those young people who would travel back to look for those things that were left behind, that generation of people. Who would wake up those who still remembered. Would be the ones who change the Anishinaabe world by doing that. And I think of my own personal quest. I wasn't out to change the world. I was just out to find something that would give me a reason to keep on trying. So I realized as I as I went to different kinds of protests and caravans, to speak out against the things that were happening to us as a people. That was a new phenomenon for us to speak out generally as a people. But in the late 60s, that was that time. It began in the United States first, and then this part of the Turtle Island in the early 70s. So my journeying through to look for those who would become my elders and my teachers. That took me, as I say, across the country to the mountains. 4 years after that, I found my way to Three Fires, Medewan Lodge. And it was soon after that I started putting the pieces together and realized that I was one of those people that the prophet spoke of. And it was a very personal connection. I felt a part of things. I felt part of the truth that was happening. And it was said that the children of the sixth fire are the ones who would stand up, are the ones who would go back along the trail looking. The children of the sixth fire. And I thought about that. I am a child of the sixth fire. So my grandparents and my parents grew up as Christians and didn't have anything to give to us about our way of life. So they were the ones who suffered because of the events of the sixth fire and the accepting of the false promise. And so whether it was because they chose not to give or they feared the consequences if they did, or the fear of being struck down by their new God. So I was, what made it so personal and for that reason so profound for me is that I realized that the prophets who spoke so many thousands of years, so many hundreds of years ago, who they were talking about. They were talking about me. So it was a good time to be alive. It was a good time to be living in this, within this new experience, which was to be who we are, who we were created to be in this world, on this turtle island, as we call it, the island that sits on the turtle's back. We are the people of that earth. And I was personally responsible, along with others, to make it happen. So this started a time of the experiences of taking back what belonged to us, and feeling whole and complete, because we latched onto it, and we struggled for the recharging or refilling of our cup of life. So during that time, as Peter O'Keefe, Keenan is his name, talked about when he was relating this story to me about the two roads. At that time, he said, we will be in truth life. And he talked about the stages of life that we go through historically. There's and in the fourth stage, we come to that time that I'm talking about now, about the seventh prophecy. And that seventh fire, that era of time that's called the seventh fire, it was talked about some 800 years, 1,000 years ago. That stage of life is We're in the fourth stage of our history now. And the seventh fire occurs during the time of truth life, was what he was saying. We will be in a situation in life where we have to make some decisions in order to be true to what the Creator had given us in gifting us with this road that we call the Red Road. We have to, it's time now, after all this history we've gone through, land being taken away from us, our struggles to get that back. So we are going through a stage where we're calling for the truth about what happened, and that will be the nature of the people of that time. They will insist on the truth. Also, that the very things that they are fighting for, that they stand up for and believe in, their desire to have that way of life back is dependent on us standing up for the truth about what happened. So from every side, we will be pushed from every side by this insistence on the truth. Also, what before could be hidden now could not be hidden. Now could not be hidden. You will not be able to hide the truth. In the past, it was possible. You could put on a smile while judging others, or by causing hurt to someone else. You put on a smiling face, as though you were the friend of the person being persecuted. Maybe in the past you could do that, but in the truth life state, you won't be able to do that. The truth will insist on being heard. The nature of that time will also be a time when everything will hang in the balance, like weigh scales. It has to balance out. Where it's heavier on one side, everything will move toward that direction, and that will be a prevailing force that you're dealing with. So being a time of balance, the always be challenged. What way of life do you follow? Who are you? What do you stand up for? What do you believe in? And at this time when everything will hang in the balance, so will your life and all the aspects of your life. So your life will be a part of that question. What way of life are you going to follow? Which path, which road are you going to travel on? That question will be asked in all kinds of different ways. And you must make a choice as to which road you're going to follow. But remember, if your children are walking on that road of life that was brought here, the red road will not bend to include your children in our way of life. So make sure your children are on this road. That will be the nature of that time. When you do have children, when you have grandchildren, when you're speaking somewhere to the people or to the children or to the youth, make sure you tell the truth. So it's a question that you will struggle with yourself and always be in pursuit of the way of life that is ours. But your commitment to that, to live that way of life, that the first question that start out is, do you know who you are? What are you looking, what are you searching for? Those questions led us to looking for the things that we want to believe in. So in all kinds of different ways, we come face to face with that question over and over again. So when we struggled to find out what our way of life was, and what we wanted to believe and what we wanted to stand up for, we went through all those things to make sure that we had them. And are you going to live by that? Now becomes the question. Are you going to be one that makes the changes, or the one who just talks about it? In another way, we're also in asking that question, or in asking the question that will come to us when we're living through that truth life state. we ourselves are asking, not just through our children, but from the moment we started to ask questions, we are asking ourselves, who am I? What is my way of life? Where can I find it? What must I do? So the question that is coming at us from all sides: Are you following the way of the false promise? Are you following the ways of the road, and the way of life of those who came here? Or are your tracks being made on your own road? And again, in the many different ways that question can be asked. In our lives today, we experience it from all sides. But as we are told that it's true to the things that happened, it was a great time. It's a great time that the people will live in at that time, when they find again what had been lost and what was left back along the trail. And they experience that in their lives through the struggles that they went through to find this, but to the joy and well-being of the benefits that we receive in our own lives for the time that we took out of our lives to search for these things. So that truth life, in truth life, everything hangs in the balance. So the things about the truth will force their way to the surface of our lives. It causes us to be involved in those in dealing with the truth of things. And so the commission that was put together to Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We're still working on the second one. That's going to take time. What it primarily was about was looking for the truth, telling the truth, and having the opportunity to tell your story. And that commission, whatever we might think of it and its outcomes and whether it be listened to or not, that commission struck a chord. And it was something that truly was part of the seventh fire. So as was talked about in the prophecies, this time that we're living in has become the time of great joy and amazement and celebration. So we've seen during this time the revival of ceremonies that have taken place. And as the prophets talked about the seventh fire, everywhere around Turtle Island, we began to experience these things. And these things began to be noticed happening all around on Turtle Island. It was a time of great excitement, great sense of joy and of peace. But there is a word of caution in there from the prophets. That is that all of this is something that is supposed to happen if and that if is presented to us very, very bluntly when it's said that when he first came, he was wearing one of two faces. He could have come wearing the face of brotherhood and respect, but he came wearing the face of death and destruction. So if you take up the ways of that road, you not only do you contribute to the loss of your own way of life, but you also, at the same time, call into question those things of your own road, your own way of life. So for Anishinaabe, for the indigenous people of Turtle Island, we in our experience, in our history, we were given a choice. So it happened in different ways in different places. But something about it was the same. And what the prophet said when he reminded us of that was that now you have to make a decision of which road you're going to follow. So as well as the great excitement that we went through it, and new things being found, and expression, the freedoms of expression that people enjoy these days, that for a long time was not the experience of our people. our artists and our writers, our dancers, our social, social, social dancing, our attendance at ceremonies of the societies and spiritual ways of life of our various nations of people on Turtle Island. We witnessed the revival of these things in our own way and in the ways of our relatives. So ours is the choice is the roads that we're going to follow, which is are your tracks being found on the red road. We would go through a time when we would almost lose everything of the ways of life that was given to us. And it was our road. The Creator didn't make a mistake when He created Anishinaabe. And somebody had to come and tell him who he was, what way of life he had to follow. But it's not true. The truth is the Creator never left anything out. He chose to make us the way He made us as a people. He didn't leave anything out. We still are what we were created to be. But because of our history, we find ourselves living a way of life that is not our own in all kinds of ways, in spiritual and ceremonial ways, in ways of thinking and ways of doing things. We're giving our children away for society to be, white society to be determining what we believe in, what way of life we follow. So are we following that road, or are we looking for and finding our own? That's a great question of our time. But it's said that for them, they will be going through a struggle as well. They will be given a choice. Our choice is: are we going to follow the red road? Are we going to follow our way of life, or are we going to follow somebody else's? And that's a choice that we'll all struggle with in all its various ways of experience. We will go through that. But our white brothers, the light-skinned people, the descendants of those who came here, will be given a choice as well. And that choice is: are you going to follow the spiritual path, or are you going to follow that way that you brought here, which is which is based on hate and greed. If you follow, if we walk on our own road and build that up to be strong again, and you who are descendants of those who came here from across the ocean, if you make the right decision, and that right decision is to respect and wear the face of brotherhood. That's the face of respect. The ones who came here never respected us. Maybe a small minority of people, but in general, we were never respected. And the only way we would be accepted is if we changed our way of life. If we gave up our ways the Creator gave to us and follow this new way of life, then maybe we would be respected as human beings. So the face of respect will be something very new to the people who are the descendants of those who came here. But they'll have to find that and wear it. And we have to figure out what that means. Especially our white brothers and sisters, they have to explore it within themselves. And they have to find out what that means for them. Because it said the future depends on it. If we don't find our way and start putting our tracks on our own road and rebuilding what was left behind, then the great promise of the seventh fire, which is everything, if we accomplish those things, we would build a future for ourselves whereby the two roads could work together, each by following their own ways to its truth and its spiritual intent. We could put a way of life together here by the two working together. We could find a good way for ourselves and build toward that future of the eighth fire, which would be a time of peace and respect and so on. If our white brother chooses the way of hate and greed, they say is apparent in our way of doing things. For their own benefit, and without considering the rest of creation, just a human cause, human beings placed in this earth, and what is going to benefit all of the people. They don't consider the animals, the trees, as living beings. They are there for the taking. They don't have a soul. They don't have a spirit. So they don't have a soul. So they, according to our needs, we will take them and use them. So in that way of doing things, there was a way, the way of life that comes out of that will be, that way of life will turn upon itself. And everything will be lost. But in the meantime, the destruction that will take place, the hurt and the pain, will be extreme. It will be the way of struggle. Our future will be the way of struggle. If that eighth fire cannot be lit, so for us, we have a decision whether we're going to follow our own way of life or whether we're going to follow their way. And when we do that, we essentially become them. And again, if that happens, we choose the wrong road, or we follow the wrong road, then the devastation and destruction that will take place in the world will begin to unfold, or it will be in a time when the things that happen in this truth life and the things that happen will be such that it affects the whole world. These are not things that will be just in our own homelands. In the future, when we don't take care of the water, it affects the world. When we don't take care of our medicines, we don't take care of our mother, the earth, then it's something that affects the whole world. Because you can't hurt your mother in one place with her body without that affecting every other place in her whole being. So the evident truth of all that is in that relationship that we have with the earth and with the creation. So I was supposed to look out for the time and not hog all of the day. I better stop talking pretty soon, or nobody will be listening. So we're in a period of time now where we have to seriously look at things. Is the state of things in the future is going to be dire. It's not a very pretty looking future if we don't do what we need to do. At the same time, it's a time of great indigenous expression. and we experience all the new possibilities of giving expression to our culture, our spirituality, and our way of life in the things that we create artistically. And the things that we do, that we're able to do, and that we do. So it's a time of great hope and great promise. But it's also a time when we could lose everything that we have. Our people made a decision a long time ago. It was related to the seventh fire. And in the medieval lodge that I am a part of, in which I am the Eastern Doorway Chief. Our Grand Chief and our teacher in that lodge. He's passed on now just a year ago. But in his youth, in his childhood, when he was between 9 and 12 years old, the Medevan people of that part of the world, that part of our world, made a decision that if they didn't do anything, we could lose this forever. So they made a decision to pull aside 32 of their children and grandchildren, and to teach them everything that they needed to know about this life, all of the ceremonies, all of the songs, all of the knowledge, all those things that are part of our spiritual way of life. They would teach them everything. 16 boys and 16 girls. And so when our Grand Chief passed away, it was passing also of the last one still alive, who was of that group of 32 people, young people. I always wondered how he knew so much. He knew something about everything. Until I heard that someone spoke about him in the lodge and identified him as one of those 32. So in our various cultures, in our various tribal groups around Turtle Island, that kind of thing was done. And because of that, there is knowledge that has been preserved into our time. And it's up to us to do something about that now. Our ancestors didn't do it for nothing. So miigwech for listening to me. And I'll end there. I should have said in the beginning who I am. I am Onaubinisay. Onaubinisay Indigenous cause. Onaubinisay, I am called Wabanaki and Golden. Wabanaki and Martin is my clan. Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and Dao. I am of the Ojibwe nation, of the first people, the indigenous people of this part of the world. Shawanaga and Donjava. Shawanaga is the place that I originate from. My home. My day was in Dao. I was I am a Devan person. I'm a Devan leader. And I am fifth degree Devan. So Bojo and miigwech in the Imaginando, all my relations.
Thank you, everyone, for that beautiful, beautiful message, Jim. I'm so thankful for all of those who walk that path that Jim just so beautifully told us about. And this is why the ancestors called us together at this time to hold these gatherings, these Healing Turtle Island gatherings, so that we can bring forward the teachings of these elders. And I have so many teachers that I'm so thankful for in my life. I'm thankful that John Bear and I had that call within us when we were young kids to run away and sneak across the border into Canada to find our ceremonies. And that we have had each other as confidants, brother and sister, to walk this path together and support one another when others in our family stayed on that Christian path, and we decided to walk this red road, and we wouldn't be able to be here without elders like Jim, without elders like Harry Laporte, who Ron talked about yesterday, and Gwen Bear, Juanita Purley, Bobby C. Billy, and Bennett Lyons, and so many others who have been a part of my life and a part of John's life, and these spiritual elders who experienced a lot of hardship by choosing to walk this path before it became the thing to do. Those ones who are out there ahead, who were searching and seeking and going without sleep and going without food and walking that road for us and making sure that path was well worn so that we could find our way. And I'm so incredibly thankful and so humbled by the beauty of this way of life, Skitchinaway. And I've asked Niskipisuwin if they would sing the humble song now, to just help us, to remind us that being humble means, just living in reverence with our hearts close to the earth, and being thankful for these elders who have kept these teachings alive for us and kept this path open for us. So much Ksalmu, Jim, my love to you, and Kachiwiliwan, thank you so much. And Niskipisuwin.
Doctrianel so tiban elab mingat nuk maso. Doctrianel so tiban elab mingat nuk maso. Jeroam kwa voltine Mawam kabazotine Whatever bilma Wam kabazotine Doctrianel so Tiban Elab mingat musum so Doctrianel so Tiban Elab mingat musum so Jeroam kwa wotine Mawam kabazotine Whatever bilma Wam kabazotine Doctrianel so Tiban Elab mingat nigwaso Doctrianel so Tiban Elab mingat nigwaso Jeroam kwa voltine Ma Wam kabazotine Whatever bilma Wam kabazotine Doctrianel so Tiban Elab mingat mitokso Doctrianel so Tiban Elab mingat mitokso Jeroam kwa wotine Mawam kabazotine Whatever bilma Wam kabazotine Doctrianel so Tiban Elab mingat ni jano Doctrianel so Tiban Elab mingat ni jano Jeroam kwa wotine Mawam kabazotine Whatever bilma Wam kabazotine Doctrianel so Tiban Elab mingat wazizo Doctrianel so Tiban Elab mingat wazizo Jeroam kwa wotine Mawam kabazotine Whatever bilma Wam kabazotinen. Doctrine so tiban elab mingut gansu svo. Doctrine so tiban elab mingut gansu svo. Jerawam kwawo tinen ma wam kabazotinen. Whatever Bilma Wamka Bazotine. Doctrine so Tiban Elab Mingut Kel was it. Doctrine so Tiban Elab Mingut Kel was it. Jerawam Kwawo Tinen Ma Wamka Bazotinen. Whatever Bilma Wamka Bazotinen. Doctrine so Tiban Elab Mingut Moswino. Doctrine so Tiban Elab Mingut Moswino. Jerawam Kwawo Tinen Ma Wamka Bazotinen. Whatever Bilma Wamka Bazotinen. Whatever Bilma Wamka Bazotinen. Whatever Bilma Wamka Bazotinen. Whatever Bilma Wamka Bazotinen. Tao. So.
One, Niskipisuwin. Thank you for that beautiful song and those words. So we're going to move on to Ron Tremblay.
Quape Siriwen. Kolaziko payud Wabanaki. We Damukta Walazawal to Mohawk Genzosuk. Because the Manwakatid Ladawaganan. Old Ake Waganan. Naga Gizi to did need to Wagada Waganal. Do we now Walazawal to Mohawk Sida Genzosuk. What the big old tea, the Chiban, or Gazavnesno. Kuskias no Galata Westno. Naga Sidegak is a meal that what the Nigabus kick to make. Naga Sidegak you'd attack Naga Watts Pump kick had leave old dated. Most we whispered out said, no we debau said, but says a Naga meetux with Musigisco. Naga you'd Hebasi out there. Spasaqsit Possesom and Lewis, Wolastoq Gaunil, Ojayao Yud Wolastoq, Naga Kaka Gospa Godum, and Naga Mal Sam Godum, Greetings all to the virtual gathering here in Wabanaki homeland, the people of the dawn. And I wanted to pay gratitude to our great Mother Earth and all that she provides for us, and the four winds where our the ancestors dwell, in the east, the south, the west, and the north, and the above world where our grandmother moon walks through the sky, and our grandfather sun, and our sisters and brothers the stars, and our great father sky, and the center here where we gather. And it was very heartwarming to listen to my teacher, Jim, share about those about the prophecies. And it was wonderful hearing his voice again and seeing him, and his looking as good looking as he always has been. It's good to see you, Jim. And we miss you here. Hopefully we can meet up again once this crazy epidemic drifts away. What I wanted to share with you today is focusing on who we are as Wolastoq, as the people of the beautiful and bountiful river here. And I'd like to begin by sharing the creation story, part of the creation story that derives here in our homeland of the Wabanaki, Wabanaki. And this is quite a time after when Wolastoq, in our language, we call the first man who had made himself from the earth. We call him Wolastoq, and many people know him as Gluskap. But in the Wolastoq way, Ladawaiwagan, in our language, we call him Wolastoq, which means the good man who bears the truth. And Wolastoq had been living with his grandmother, Munimquest, groundhog, for a long time. And she was teaching him. And she was teaching him how to live with all creation, with the animal world, the plant world, the water, and the ones who live in the water, ones who live in the air, and the ones who crawl in and on the earth. So he had been learning from the animals how to live with that, with that balanced lifestyle. And then eventually he went back to his lodge one time, and he went to talk to his grandmother, Munimquest. He said, Munimquest, he said, I'm getting bored living the same lifestyle, and I believe I had learned all what needs to be learned from the animal world, the plant world, the rock, the water world. He says, I want to have a relationship with humans that look like me, that walk like me, and that move like me. So she told him that I want you to travel as far east to where the big water is, the ocean. And I want you to go there for 4 days and 4 nights. I want you to build a fire. I want you to build a wigwam. And I want you to sit in silence and listen to the wind, listen to the trees, listen to the animals, and listen to the water, for they will instruct you in what to do. So Galwaskab did exactly what Monimquest told him to do. He traveled as far east as he could to what is now known as Nova Scotia, the coast where the big water is. So he built a hut, a wigwam, and giziton skud, and he built a fire. He sat there night and day for 4 days and 4 nights as he meditated and listened very intensely to the instructions. And it is believed that this is where our 4-day fasting ceremony came from. This is the first time that this fasting ceremony came to volition, is when Monimquez, Galwaskab's grandmother, told him to do so. So as he sat there, he heard voices around him to instruct him to go to this huge tree, the ash tree, Kaps, or Wicp. And he was instructed to break a huge branch off of Wicp, the ash tree. So he did. And as he sat by the fire, he whittled down and made a long, thin, bendable stick from that huge branch. And then he was instructed again to go back to that wick, the ash tree, and break off a smaller branch. So he did. He listened to instructions. He brought back a smaller branch, and he was instructed to make sure that this one was very straight and narrow. So he whittled that down. And as he sat by the fire, he listened to the instructions again. And he was asked to go and talk to his brother Moose to see if his brother Moose could sacrifice its life for him, so he could use the sinew that is connected to the vertebrae of the moose, use that for string and to tie. So Brother Moose did sacrifice his life for Galwaskab. So Galwaskab was so grateful to Brother Moose for sacrificing his life. So he took the sinew, that tissue that connects the vertebrae of the moose, took it back to his lodge, his wigwam, and he tied one end of the long stick to the other, and he made a huge bow. And then eventually he went back to his fire. He listened for more instructions. And then he was asked to go and talk to his sister Ditagal, the owl, to see if she can sacrifice some feathers. So Ditagal said, sure. She sacrificed some feathers to Galwaskab. And eventually, Galwaskab went back to the fire, sat there, and he listened for more instructions. And then eventually, he was told to take a shale rock to chisel it down to make an arrow head. So he did. He asked his relative, the rock, see if he can use it to chisel down to make an arrowhead. So we did. Eventually, he took the feathers and placed them and tied them on one end of the smaller stick from the ash tree. And then he took the chiseled stone and tied it to the other end and made an arrow. So that last night he was sitting there with what he had constructed, a bow and the arrow. And he sat there and listened by the sacred fire. And then he heard a voice tell him, at first light, I want you to walk to the edge of where the big water is. And as grandfather's sun comes up in the east, I want you to turn your back to grandfather's sun. And I want you to face the land. And before you, you will see a huge tree, the ash tree, the very one that you took the 2 branches from, and it will be standing in front of you. So we followed the instructions, and he went there at first light. And as soon as grandfather's sun peeked through the east and shone on the earth, the very first light that struck the earth was the very top of that wick, that ash tree. And as soon as the light hit the top of the ash tree, Wolastoq took his bow and he strung back the arrow, and he let the arrow go, and he shot into the wick, the ash tree, and he split the tree in half. The noise was so immense that it shook the earth. And the tree, as it split in half, a huge light came up from the tree, like a bolt of lightning. And up from the deepest roots of that wick, the ash tree, the very deep roots of it, emerged Wabanaki, the very first people, the people of the dawn. These beautiful brown-skinned, dark-haired, dark-eyed people came up from the split of the tree, and they stood before Wolastoq, the good man who bears the truth. And he was overwhelmed and in awe of these beautiful people, these elderly women and men and women and children who emerged from wick, the ash tree. And the very first covenant, the agreement, the very first treaty that was spoken was that Wolastoq told the Wabanaki that your very first treaty is with creation, with our great mother, the earth, with her veins, all the waterways, the water systems, with the four-legged, the flyers, the swimmers, the crawlers, with all the flora and fauna and fungi, all with the rock people and all that's above you. Your grandfather, who is the sun, your grandmother, who is the moon, and your father, who is the sky, and your brothers and sisters, the stars. Your very first covenant is with them, that you walk in peace and balance with them, that you only take what you need, because Galwaskab, prior to the coming of the Wabanaki, had went around and spoke to all the animals to tell them that the two-legged were coming and that they would need them to survive. And he told all the plants and the water the same. And Galwaskab said, I will teach the Wabanaki how to respect you and how to live with you. So those were the first instructions and the treaties amongst us, the Wabanaki, to the earth and all that dwells in the earth here in Wabanaki. To this day, our people still remember these things. Many have gone astray, as my teacher, Jim, has talked about. Many of our people have been taken away from their original teachings and been forced to learn another way of life, another religion, and have left, not forgotten, but left the true way of our people. But the uplifting and amazing thing is that there are still people who remember these stories. And there was the one who first told me this story. His name was Cozy. He was a Passamaquoddy man, and he used to visit my aunt and my uncle in Nagotkuk, Tobik. And I was just a young boy when he shared this story with me. And I still remember later on in life that Cozy came back, and David Francis, and he visited. A bunch of the elders came to my house and they visited us and they shared many stories like this. And I remember Cozy again sharing this beautiful story. And I reminded him that I recall when I was a young boy, first hearing that story from him when he was visiting my auntie's store in Nagotkuk. And our people still today make baskets from wick, the ash tree. And we were told that the base of the ash basket is the ancestors, and all the ancestors that have been woven in to the basket that hold all our teachings and our wisdom and knowledge in the basket. And all that's woven in on the sides are our great-great-grandmothers and our great-great-grandfathers and our grandmothers and our grandfathers, our aunties, our uncles, who bind the buzanud, the basket, together. But the very top that tie our buzanud together, our basket together, and hold it together are the children. who is going to make sure, as our great teacher Jim had said, it's going to be their responsibility. That eighth fire, they're the eighth fire who's going to bring forward all these beautiful teachings for their children and for their great-grandchildren. So as time went on, from the first Wabanaki, the people of the dawn, they had moved, and they moved westward, southward, and northward. And then eventually we had separated into various nations. And for us, who were called Wolastoq, the people of the beautiful and bountiful river, came here to a place what they call today New Brunswick, parts of Quebec, parts of Maine. And our people were called at the beginning, Gilhizawejik, muskrat people. As this is our original symbol of a man and a woman polling, following our totem, our totem, Gilhiz, the muskrat. So as we were living here and remembering the teachings of Galwascub, and at this time, this beautiful river we call Wolastoq was not flowing all the way up to where it is flowing today. It was just a small tributary off Zobek, the ocean. So what had occurred was that our people depended on water, as we all still do today, for fishing, for drinking, for traveling, and all up along the banks of our rivers grew our medicines, grew our food, such as nuts, wild potatoes, fiddleheads, berries. So our people were totally dependent on the river, Zib. But unfortunately, one day, when our people went down to the banks of the river had dried up, and they had no water, and they seen the fish who had dried up and died. So eventually, Jizogam, the great chief of our nation, had sent some of their best runners and best warriors up to figure out where the river went. When they reached the destination, is they seen that the river that they so depended on was all dammed up, and bathing in the water on the other side of the river that was dammed up by huge boulders was a creature called Uglabem. And Uglabem was a large creature who was the nemesis of Galwascub and our people. So he was hoarding the water and bathing in it and drinking it. And he was enjoying the water for himself. Eventually, the warriors trying to reason with him and he refused, and he hurt and he killed some of our warriors. And the ones that survived went back down to our village, and they met with Kchizogam, great chief, grand chief. So the grand chief had gathered all the elders, the old ones, and all the people, and they held a ceremony. They lit a sacred fire. They sang songs, and they put out words for help, crying out words for help. And then Galwaskub heard them during his sleep. He woke up and he heard wailing and crying from these Gilhazuijik, the muskrat people. So Galwaskub eventually went to visit our people. He got there during morning as the fog was lifting, and the people were still dancing and singing around a huge sacred fire. Galwaskub approached our people, and the great chief, Kchizogam, told him what was going on. So Galwaskub eventually crafted a plan and went to the place where the Uglabem was hoarding the water. And he tried to rhyme and reason with Uglabem. But he would not put down the huge boulders and let the water flow. So Uglabem was sitting on top of the huge boulders and mocking Galwaskub. So Galwaskub had warned him a few times, but he would not heed to his request. So Galwaskub pushed down a huge tree, a humongous tree. And as the tree fell on top of the Uglabem and the huge boulders that was damming the water back from its natural flow. So as the tree fell, it hit the earth so hard that it made a huge indent into the earth. So the tree went into the earth. And all of a sudden, the water flow exactly where the place where the tree had indented the earth. This main part of the tree became Wolastoq, the beautiful and bountiful river. And the branches of this beautiful and bountiful river, Wolastoq, became all the tributaries of Wolastoq. And these tributaries flowed south, north, and east, and west. So this huge tree squashed the Uglabem. And then tiny pieces of Uglabem was scattered all over the earth and the water. So the spirit of Uglabem still remains. That greed, that selfishness still remains. So when Galwaskub returned to the village where our people were gathering, our people loved the new river named Wolastoq so much that they asked Galwaskub to turn them into various fish that we have today in Wolastoq, the salmon, the trout, the bass. So that night they held a huge ceremony feast for Galveston, thanking him for what he done. So from that day forward, our people were known as Wolastoq Gawiag, the people of the beautiful and bountiful river. And the Wolastoq flowed ever so natural for many, many centuries. And our people totally dependent on her, the beautiful vein that was created from that huge tree, the vein of our great Mother Earth. She supplied us with as much food as we needed to survive. We were always salmon people. We were fiddlehead people. We had gathered medicines on the banks, the wild nuts, the wild potatoes, and all the medicine that grow. But there was a time our people forgot because Galveston had left, and he told our people, the Wabanaki Prophecy, that I will return one day during the hardships of your people. I will still continue to send messengers to help and guide you. So there was a time when Wolastoq Gawiag, our people, became lost, and they forgot their first covenant to their great Mother Earth and to all creation, four-leggeds, the flyers, the swimmers and the crawlers, and all the flora and the fauna and the fungi, and the rock people. They became selfish and greedy because the spirit of the Aglabam still lingered around our shores. So that greed started to overtake our people. And they wasted, and they took more than they needed. So all of a sudden, a great sickness came over our people. And a lot of the elders started to die. And what was hard to see was the children started to die. So there was a huge worry amongst our people because they have neglected to follow the original teachings. And one night, this old man laid sick in his wigwam, shortness of breath, close to death. And he had a little fire going inside his wigwam. He was feeding it. He could barely lift his head. And all of a sudden, the flap of his wigwam opened. And in stepped this little old man. And he looked at the elder man lying on his bed. He said, "You are dying." He said, "Yes." And the little old man said, "Many of your people of your nation had died." "Yes," the old man replied. He says, I am here to bring a cure for the illness that your people have. And this little old man said, "I want you to get up off your bed and I want you to follow me." And the old man who was laying in his bed said, "I can barely lift my head." And the little old man standing at the doorway said, "You can get up. You have to save your people." So the old man did get up off his bed, and he stood up and he grabbed his labdahun, his cane, and he followed the little old man out. And the little old man said, "Follow me, and I will show you a medicine that's going to cure your people." And the little old man followed or walked down this path, and the old man followed him. And he got to a place where it was really marshy. So the little old man showed him where this medicine was growing. He said, "I want you to get on your knees and start digging in the ground from this really long leaf. And I want you to pick the root and get your hands in there and dig it up." So the old man did. He got on his knees. He took all the energy of him to do so. So once he picked all the medicine that he needed, and he looked up to the little old man, he says, "How will I remember what this looks like?" So the little old man showed him his body. He says, "Labmin, look at me." And as the old man looked at the little old man, that his body was the same color and the same shape as the root that he just picked. And he told, the little old man told the old man, "You come here, pick as much medicine that you need to cure your people." And little old man told him to take it back to his lodge, his wigwam, dry it. And you need to dry it for a while, and then you can make it into a tea, boil it, and break off the little roots, put it into a tea, or you can chew on the root, and this will cure your people. But you need to pick more. The little old man said, "You have to pass this around to all your people who are sick." He says, "And they will be cured." So as the old man bent down to pick more medicine, he looked up to thank the little old man, and the little old man had disappeared. He had vanished. And this root that we pick even still today we call it Gilhizawask muskrat root. And this is the this is a piece of it that I picked this past fall. And even still today, our people go out in late fall to pick this at a marshy place by rivers. And this is the main medicine that we use to help us to protect our immune system from viruses, from colds. So this is why we were called at the beginning, Gilhizawijik, we were called the muskrat people because of this beautiful medicine. And that our dodem in our symbol is Gilhiz, the muskrat. So here we are today during an epidemic, and many of our people are lost and sick. And all these viruses have been created by man. This is a clear message to us. As our great elder teacher Jim said, that many of our people of all races have lost their way. We lost the respect We lost our very first covenant, our very first treaty was with our great Mother Earth and all that she provides for us. So we need to shift our whole thought process, our lifestyle, our whole being, how we speak, how we think, how we move, how we walk, how we listen. So as a Wolastoq Gewiyik, once that beautiful and bountiful river was created, our responsibility was to protect her because she gave us everything we needed, as well as our name. And unfortunately, many of our people have forgotten our responsibility. I recall being a very young boy at a preschool age of probably 5. And I remember walking down the road with my mom hand in hand to go visit my Musums and my Nukmas, my grandfather and grandmother in Nagutkuk, what they call Tobik. And I remember going down their dirt driveway and walking in back of their house. And my mom went upstairs to visit her mom. And my grandfather was working in his backyard. It was in the spring, so he was hoeing the earth, getting ready to plant his vegetables. And I watched him as he worked. And then when he was finally done, he said, "But Chquigos, with Zunojo." So he said, "Come here, my son. Walk here to the bank of the river." So my Mosums pointed across the river, and he lived at a spot where Nagut and Wolastoq came together. The two rivers met, and my grandfather's house was on the banks near the two rivers. He said, "What, Agamil?" He said, "What? Way over there across the river. This is, I used to pick all my medicine there. And there was nuts, wild nuts that grew there. There was fiddleheads. It was so abundant." And then he pointed up downriver. He said, "What now?" He said, "Way over there," he said. He said, "I remember," he said, "before these dams were built." He says, "the salmon would come up to spawn." And he spoke our language fluently to me. And he was telling me this in our Wolastoq Wagan, our beautiful language. He said, "I remember as a boy," he said, "you can hear Blamuk, the salmon coming up. You would hear them before you would see them." And he said that Wolastoq would be just shaking. And it sounded like a freight train. He says, thousands and thousands of salmon coming up to spawn. There was so many of them. He says, you can actually walk on their back. That there was that many of them. He said, in my nigawis, and my mother would tell me, "Najib pan balam." And he said, my mother would say, go get a salmon. We're going to have salmon for supper. He said, I go down there without a net, without a rod. He said, I just stood there. He says, and I just grabbed a salmon with my bare hands. He said, they were huge. And he said, they would be slapping me on my chest and they would bruise me. But he said, I know we were going to feast that night. And then he would climb up over the bank, and then he would, take the life of the salmon and take it into his mom. He says that would do them for a few meals. He says that they never went without food during that time of year because of the beautiful abundance of salmon. So, and again, because of these dams that's been constructed, there are actually 5 dams within Wolastoq and the Nagot River. 5 dams. And if you compare the Wolastoq as being the main, the artery that used to keep our people alive, that was the main, the artery that kept our people's heart pumping, and the mass nutrition that salmon brought to our people, and all the clean medicine and the food that grow next to her banks, how our people were so healthy. There was no diabetes, cancer, or other brought in viruses or like illnesses from the Western world. So as my grandfather was telling me this story, and I remember the sun was shining in his face that beautiful spring morning, and I looked up at him as he was sharing with me the story. He had tears coming down his cheeks. And I've very seldomly seen my grandfather weep. That's the first time that I seen him cry. And I knew this story meant a lot. Even as a 5-year-old, I still remember this. And I'm 61 now. This was quite a few years ago, but this story is literally tattooed in my brain that I will never forget. And later on in life, when I started following this beautiful red road, I remember going to ceremony into lodges over to Olson Witzgood, Harry Laporte's lodge, and then Danny, the elder from Nagotkog, Danny Innes would come down and sit with us in the lodge, and he'd bring his wisdom inside the lodge and share with us some beautiful teachings. And I remember Dan always began his prayer of gratitude in the lodge by saying, Wolastoq nil, aga nil Wolastoq, meaning I am Wolastoq and the Wolastoq is me. Another beautiful teaching that I will never forget. And our great teacher, Dan, unfortunately passed last year. But I still pay gratitude to his beautiful teachings. And also with Scott Harry Laporte, also passed 4 years ago. So I want to thank them for their beautiful teachings. So we are at a place in time as humanity, as our teacher Jim said, we are at a very crucial time, crossroads, where we have to decide. We have to look deep in ourselves. How we are going to live. Do we walk this red road, or we walk the easy road? So I want to share with you in closing a couple things. I have to put on my glasses so I can see. I had wrote a poem a couple weeks ago, and excuse me, I got to look it up. The poem is entitled Wolastoq, which means the beautiful and bountiful river. Wolastoq, you have honored us with your glorious name. Wolastoq, you are the veins of our great mother. Wolastoq, you were once a beautiful and bountiful river. Wolastoq, you had once graciously flowed pure and clean to the ocean. Wolastoq, you had once carried our canoes ever so willingly. Wolastoq, you had once provided a safe home for salmon. Wolastoq, you had once supplied plentiful medicines on your banks. Wolastoq, you were once respected and protected. Wolastoq, you were once our everything. Wolastoq, we are you and you are us. Wolastoq, we are extremely sorry for neglecting our responsibility to care for you. Wolastoq, please remember, we have always loved you. So in closing, I want to share a beautiful song that Sagate Gwenbear left with us called Wolastoq, to honor her. And I will share the song, and I hope I give it justice. And I just want to show my teacher, Jim, that I still hold dearly the Medellin shaker that you had gifted me years ago. And I want to thank you for this shaker. And I still use it in our ceremony. Sakate, Leben to your Linta Wagon. Mother Leben. Wolastoq b'malagwe, ahaji debamigo. Wolastoq b'malagwe, zupagwelnia. Niguas pamipin, wazizaj nelaska mil. Niguas pamipin, wazizaj nelaska mil. Wolastoq b'malagwe, ahaji debamigo. Wolastoq b'malagwe, zupagwelnia. Migwas permipin, wazis ijmel astamil. Migwas permipin, wazis ijmel astamil. Wolastoq is flowing, flowing and growing. Wolastoq is flowing down to the sea. Mother, carry me, a child I will always be. Mother, carry me, a child I will always be. Wolastoq b'malagwe, ahaji debamigo. Wolastoq malagwe, zopagwalamia. Nigwas permipin, wazis ejnelaskamil. Nigwas permipin, wazis ejnelaskamil. Sakate, 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 sakate. Nidlage, naga kamaj, gazal mopa. Let that be so, and I love you all. Amen.
Everyone, Nita, thank you so much, Ron, for sharing those words with us and for your demonstrated love for your teachers and for honoring that beautiful song that so many of us have come to love and that means so much to us. That was given to you by your teacher, Gwen Bear. We are supposed to have one more speaker this morning, Elder Mona Palaka, who is having some difficulty with technology. And so we're going to break for lunch now, and we will be back at 1:30. And we hope that you will be able to join us at that time. And we're going to have a very full afternoon. So we're going to go out right now and have ceremony by the fire here. And we'll be including all of you in our prayers. And we'll see you back here again at 1:30. So have a good lunch and put your feet on the earth, breathe some fresh air, and drink some water while we're out there. Okay, we'll see you soon.